Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We just had a magnitude 7.1 earthquake strike Malaysia just about an hour ago. Not even that. And this was a super deep earthquake occurring almost at the very final lower limit of depth that is possible for earthquakes at about 620 kilometers down. So thankfully it was deep in some aspects because when you have a deep earthquake, it's causing less shaking to the surface. That seismic energy has to propagate through more and more geology and rock layers and more. So it basically attenuates heavily versus, let's say, at 10 kilometers of depth, that would be quite destructive. And as it relates to offshore earthquakes with the ocean, if it's a very deep earthquake, you're not going to get a tsunami. It'd be very, very, very unlikely and rare to get any sort of tsunami from that because it's happening so far down. The geophysical dynamics with deep earthquakes are dramatically different than they are shallow earthquakes. But that's important because we've been having a lot of deep earthquakes this month. And because it's speaking to different geophysics and geologic processes, there's a bit of an indication that this could be a wave of deep earthquakes leading up to something bigger closer to the surface. Because we've also been in what you could call a seismic drought. The last magnitude 7+ earthquake was December 8th of 2025, a magnitude 7.6 that occurred in Japan. We are forecasting a big earthquake to hit Japan back in November and early December. Boom, we had one. So that's what we do on the channel. We look at solar activity, space weather, earth events, and do our best to forecast out high magnitude earthquake rhythms across the globe. We've been in this earthquake drought, but now it's starting to come to an end as we've had a sequence of magnitude 5s here near Fiji, in the Kermadec Trench, near Vanuatu and more. Not all of them have been super, super deep, but we see this magnitude 6.1 there, Kermadec Trench, 167 kilometers down. That was on the 4th of February. Then we had this magnitude 6.2 here, Fiji, 510 kilometers in depth on the 10th. That was the first really deep earthquake, clearly at close to that maximum depth that you can get, which is about 600, 700 kilometers. It's really rare to go beyond that. And then we have had some other earthquakes. For example, this large 6.4 Vanuatu 4 days later. That was just at the surface though. But then just today, we had a magnitude 6.0 at Fiji just before this magnitude 7.1 Malaysia, and that's at 654 kilometers in depth. We also had a 5.3 earthquake that was at nearly the same depth. I think it was actually a little deeper. We also see that just yesterday, we had a magnitude 6.0 earthquake, Solomon Islands, at a shallower depth. So you see this mixing of earthquakes that are shallow and deep, but we've been having more deep ones. And this area here specifically is very well known for very deep earthquakes. It's very unique geology there. The oceanic plate that's subducting underneath this oceanic plate actually goes vertical as it then starts to penetrate and sink into the mantle. It's really interesting. It's really cool. So it's not just like this oblique angle it's going in, it's actually curling and then going straight down. Well, now we have this new magnitude 7.1, definitely more energy than all those other earthquakes that I've shown you combined, and also occurring at a very, very deep level in Earth's, it's actually beyond Earth's crust. This is the boundary between the mantle and the crust. So this is the upper mantle, it's in the asthenosphere. We do get earthquakes sometimes in the mantle. And that's kind of a big question mark as to how that occurs. Not a complete question mark, but a big one still, because the mantle is more ductile. And it's not supposed to really have earthquakes, yet it does. So this is showing, along with the other magnitude 6s that I've shown you, Fiji, Kermadec Trench, that have been really deep, that there could be some changes occurring to deeper parts of the earth. And now with the 7.1, we see it's more distributed across the globe. That is indicating perhaps that there's going to be some bigger plate movement to follow. I will just mention, I don't put too much into this, but this is interesting. So shout out to this guy. He messaged me on Instagram a few days ago saying, hey, I noticed that every time there's like a little swarm of magnitude 2s in Australia, we get something bigger. And I was like, okay, you know, I get a lot of messages and some of them are great. Some of them are out there. And I read it. Thanks for the info. But I didn't think much about it because they're magnitude 2s. Well, the guy's been spot on in terms of what's been happening recently. And it's not like he's in British Columbia saying this. He's in Australia. So we have been having this magnitude 6, and now we've had our first big earthquake since December, early December of 2025. So it's been nearly 3 months now, this earthquake drought finally coming to an end. Let's see if they've updated our earthquake graphic here from Volcano Discovery. So you can see what I'm talking about with this earthquake drought they have. Seismic activity right now is very high. We see that. We had a little seismic burst here. Not really a big one, but the magnitude 7 that struck Alaska, the Yukon, so Canada, Alaska, that was on the 6th of December. And then we see this magnitude 7.6 right there. So really quite significant. Then we had this period with a bunch of magnitude 6.4 and 6.5s going off, but kind of interspersed with moderate and low activity. Green is moderate, gray is low, but right here has been very, very low activity for about a month, if not more. This is a 3-month graph here. So this is a little bit more than a month, maybe 5 weeks. This is the 6.4 Vanuatu, and here is our magnitude 7.1 Malaysia. And what we often see is after long droughts like this, where it's just low to moderate activity, we don't just get one earthquake to pop off, we get multiple high magnitude earthquakes to pop off. One very strong reason why is because of the solar activity. I have a lot to talk about today. There's been avalanches that have been occurring across the globe in snowy regions. I had that precognition dream about avalanches, which is weird. We have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction still in effect right now. Keep that in mind. That's a once in 36-year event. We had a geomagnetic storm start up in the past 24 hours. A high-speed stream hit us. You see a plasma filament just blasted off there. We have a bomb cyclone forming off the east coast of the United States. So we're going to get into a lot of things. We're going to do a question and answer as well at the end of the main presentation. So if you have a question, you can either A, hold on to it and ask it during the public Q&A. I'll take some questions from the general audience at the beginning. If you want your question answered, then you can attach it to a super thanks, and I will go through my list and answer all those questions. Unless it's absolutely not so. But in general, I answer all of them. So love you all. That's great. We're going to do that Q&A, but we'll do our main report now. But here's the sun. We're looking at our 211 angstrom view of the sun. I just put the 193 colors on because it shows up a little nicer. And we see this very large coronal hole here. We just had a coronal hole high-speed stream impact. These coronal holes are areas in the sun's outermost atmosphere known as the corona, which is made up of very hot and high temperature plasma, millions of degrees Kelvin. Well, when it shows up dark, that means that there's basically no plasma there. It's a giant hole in the sun's outermost atmosphere. It's known as a coronal hole. And what happens is you have a magnetic field configuration here that streams out into space. So normally you get these loops that go back in. Here we actually see that filament blast off, right? So that's like a magnetic loop that's holding this plasma together and then it released. But in general, the magnetic field of the sun loops back in on itself. Well, with the coronal hole, it basically just extends far out into interplanetary space. And that creates like this vacuum effect where it sweeps up and shoots out all the plasma in that area and just basically creates this high-speed stream of solar wind. When it is at the equator of the sun, this being the equator right about there, that means that that high-speed stream will sweep past the Earth because it's sweeping along the ecliptic plane, that flat plane that runs in between the sun and the Earth. So we've just had a coronal hole high-speed stream impact. That one is now just on the far side. We don't see it anymore. That was a few days ago. Now we have this big guy, Earth center and direct. We do see big earthquakes occur with coronal holes, either Earth center, which is interesting because they're not geo-effective yet. But if you look through the record, like you actually go through and look at the record going back to 1970, Either the biggest earthquakes occur with either a large coronal hole, Earth center and direct. They're not tiny, I'm talking big. Like this is a fairly big one. Earth center and direct, or in the geoeffective position, or after when you're still getting that high-speed stream sweep by, because it takes some time. But the fact that this is not, I don't think it's gone geoeffective yet, or it's just starting to. If it has, we have had an increase in the solar wind velocity kind of unexpectedly about 12 hours ago or so. So it's possible, but it's not really in that geo position yet. So in general, we're seeing solar wind turbulence that's likely to continue, and I think this could be the beginning of a more sustained global seismic burst with more magnitude 6s, perhaps more magnitude 7s, 1 or more, and perhaps even megaquakes. That's certainly possible. You get about 1 a year. We had 1 last year. Before that, we didn't have any for 4 years. Probably we're a little overdue to kind of catch back up to that reoccurrence interval. Sometimes you get more than 1. You get 3 or 4. It can get really wild. So certainly anything is possible when you have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in the sky, a very big, powerful planetary resonance. It makes all this a little bit more likely. So that is happening. Let's look at our real-time solar wind so I can show you what I'm talking about with this geostorm. And let's just get this scaled for you all. Here's our real-time solar wind. We're not in a geomagnetic storm anymore, but the conditions are still active. This is our 7-day view. So you see that things were effectively normal until we had a coronal mass ejection impact. We see that our solar wind went up from normal values, started to spike up. We went all the way up to 15 nanotesla, which is 5 times stronger than normal. And we see that we had the strong northward field. You notice that that did not really trigger a significant geostorm. We did get up to a value of 4 instead of 5, which is here, which is a G1 minor storm. This is the KP index, a measure of geomagnetic volatility. Effectively, what we're looking at is Earth's magnetic field, which is a force field, right? And when there's big fluctuations in the field strength across different vector directions and everything, that's the volatility. And we measure that, compile into an index. 0 is almost no fluctuations. 9 is like an extreme storm. Things are crazy. You may actually should be a little worried about maybe power grid failures and communication issues and more. Well, this got up to a 4, so it was active conditions. It wasn't a minor storm. But then when we flipped back south and we got this turbulence there, boom, we had that G1 storm. It lasted for 6 hours. We see a value of 5 there, 5.33. And we are still at active conditions. Overall magnetic volatility is higher. Here's what's interesting. We had this volatility that triggered this geomagnetic storm, and then you notice that near the end of this is when our solar wind velocity jumped up. And that was kind of a surprise because it goes from 520 all the way up to like 650. Right now we're at 632 kilometers per second. So very strange. Because that coronal hole, again, if I show you that, it's not really in that geoeffective position yet. This is like about 48 hours of imagery here. So at the very end, we'll see where it is right now. But it's not in that geoeffective position yet. It's about to be, probably about 24 hours, 48 hours, we'll start to get hit by that. But clearly there was some high velocity burst of solar wind embedded in between these two high-speed streams. One that's hit us, this one that's about to hit us. So it's nearly there. I just don't think that's from that, though maybe. It's kind of hard to say at the end of the day, but we already are in high velocity conditions. So that is important to note. Though our solar wind is kind of returning back to normal values, if this stays elevated and the solar wind stays fast, that compresses Earth's magnetic field. And in general, with Earth already having a pretty well-charged global electric circuit at this moment in time, from early February when we had all that tremendous solar activity, even that risk of a modern Carrington event was greatly elevated from that sunspot group 4366, if you remember, basically a massive magnetic sunspot, which is about to rotate back, by the way. Well, now small disturbances like this isn't really anything too crazy, what we're seeing here, but we are getting a G1 storm out of it, and that's not too crazy, but you just kind of stack all these things together. G1 geomagnetic storm, Saturn, Neptune, great conjunction in harmonic aspect to Pluto and Uranus. now you have this magnitude 7.1 earthquake. Like all this stuff added together starts to create something that's greater than the sum of the parts, right? The entourage effect, and just that's very true in nature, that kind of symbiosis. There's a lot happening. We have a sun diving comet right now flying into our solar system. We'll approach the sun April 4th. Let me show you sunspots because this is pretty interesting. We have right now, for the first time in this solar cycle, going back to the minimum, 0 sunspots on the Earth-facing side. 0. There are no sunspots on the Earth-facing side of the sun right now. Absolutely none. So we've been in solar maximum. We're at the end of the solar maximum period. I would say this certainly probably is your sign that solar maximum is at an end. And now we're in the descending phase. Because you're not going to have a solar maximum where you have 0 sunspots. That's just basically not solar maximum. Now the sunspots are very, they're differentiated right now. We have a lot of sunspots on the far side. We have no sunspots on the Earth-facing side. There's this weird bimodal distribution of sunspots right now. It's very similar to what's happening with society and the polarization that has occurred, where there's so many people that are just so far apart from each other and be able to relate to each other, unfortunately. And the sun is literally reflecting this, or maybe we're reflecting what the sun is showing. So we have no sunspots on the Earth-facing side, but we do have sunspots on the far side. Let me show you. We have our helioseismic data. We can look at this. This is from the University of Stanford. This is a low-resolution look at what's happening on the sun's far side, but it does show us something. So here's our magnetogram showing us what's active on the Earth-facing. Doesn't mean we have nothing happening, just no active big sunspots, okay? But here we see our far side of the sun, and this right there is 4366. That's another sunspot group right behind. And in general, it looks like most of the sun is fairly clear. Most of the magnetic flux on the sun is concentrated in these 2 regions here. This helioseismic, or heliogram, I guess you call it, helioseismogram, being generated for the 21st of February at 12 UTC, and well, it's more than a day after that now. So they're always running about 24, 36 hours behind, and so this is actually even closer. We're probably about 3 days away, 4 days maximum, from that sunspot reaching the limb of the sun and rotating the view, and well, we could be in for another show. That is very, very possible. Very possible. I think it's actually likely. The fact that it is still there on the far side, we have this other sunspot group as well. I think we're in for some fireworks coming up soon. So that is what's happening with the sun. Let's go back. It looks like there was a plasma filament that launched off. Let's see what this was all about. This is the Earth Analytics webpage on my website, earthevolution.com/energy-analytics. This is linked in the video description. It's a good page to give you a sense of what's happening with earthquakes, what's happening with the Earth in terms of aurora or the radiation belts, what's happening with the sun. You can even go down here, check out the planetary alignments that are active with our solar system scope model. Recommend you bookmark this if you're into this stuff like I am, or even just 5% as much as I am. I'm really into it. But we've been having some really crazy plasma tornadoes here on the eastern limb of the sun up in the northern hemisphere. This is the eastern limb solar coordinate system. This is the western limb. It's reversed because we're looking at it from the perspective of the sun. But we should see a plasma filament blast off right there. Wow, boom shakalaka. That's a big plasma filament that just blasted off. We've been having a lot of that. So while we're now entering into the descending phase of solar cycle 25, and we haven't had any big solar flares since that burst that occurred early February. We had 6 X flares, dozens of M flares. We've been getting big coronal mass ejections to launch as a result of filaments. So it's been pretty wild. 1 second. Okay. So there has been quite a lot of activity in the sun, just expressed differently. We've also been having these coronal holes and their high-speed streams, and we're more likely to see that sort of activity as we go into the descending phase and into solar minimum. We're also more likely to see earthquake activity. We see with the recent earthquake record and the solar activity record for about the past 30, 40, 50 years, is that we get more earthquakes during the descending phase and during solar minimum than we do during solar maximum. And the thought process there in general, it's kind of two main parts to it, is that A, the Earth is loaded with all this energy during solar maximum, and then it's when the sun pulls back that the Earth releases that energy. That's A. B, you also in general have more coronal hole high-speed stream impacts during solar minimum. So these coronal holes are typically more active during solar minimum versus solar maximum, especially during the descending phase. And since these are big drivers of earthquakes, at least that's what the research indicates, and quite strongly, and we see it time and time again, we've been tracking this for a long time on the channel, very precisely, and using it to forecast global trends in seismicity quite accurately. Well, these are a big component. The reason why 2025 was such an active year seismically, one of the strong, in the top, I think it's the 7th strongest year on record seismically, only behind the years where we've had magnitude 9 earthquakes and 1906, where we had a huge seismic burst, was because we had a ton of coronal holes on the sun, even though it was solar maximum, which is quite odd to have that many that large. So there's been some weird dynamics with the sun happening. Let's go back to our magnitude 7.1 earthquake. Again, this just happened. Let's see if we've had any aftershocks. We'll check out our USGS map here. So here we are. This is still showing up as a 7.1 via USGS. They have not downgraded it. They get the data and they look at it, and sometimes they'll reduce the magnitude a little bit, sometimes a lot, depending on their calculations. Some people speculate that there are other reasons as well. In general, I don't think that's really the case. Either way, 7.1 Malaysia, no aftershocks that I'm noticing over 4.5 yet. Let's look here. That's all magnitudes. We only have the 7.1. If I switch this to newest, yeah, only the 7.1. So that's a little odd. Typically, you would start to see some aftershocks, but that could also be a function of the depth. This is, again, at 620 kilometers down. So at that depth, it's not really a slip event like this. It's more of a implosion underground. There's like this energy exothermic reaction that occurs, and you have mineral bonds actually change such that you have new minerals. You have like a mineral conversion event where one mineral type will convert to another rapidly, and as a result, that'll generate like this exothermic reaction, this implosion that can be associated with a volume change, because this is so deep down. You're not, I mean, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of plate movement and more, but it's more about how if you have one mineral with a density of 1, and then you have mineral B with a density of 9.5, like 0.95, right? And it converts to B. Now you have, a density of 1.1. Now you have less space taken up, and boom, you get this implosion. So that's kind of what occurs. And these can be tremendously powerful. Let's actually see just how powerful. Let's put this into context. We have our earthquake calculator from Omni. We'll put in magnitude 7.1, see what it says. It's going to be big. Magnitude 7.1, and if we look at this in megajoules, that's just a lot of megajoules, but it's equivalent to 675,000 sticks of TNT or 45 Hiroshima bombs. And if we compare that to the Tsar bomb, which is the largest nuclear bomb ever dropped, that is equivalent to 0.01 Tsar bombs. So we do have some very powerful bombs that exist. Now, if we type that in as an 8.1, we see that even then we're only at 0.37 Tsar bombs. But if we go to, for example, a 8.5, now we are really scaling up. So yeah, and in Europe they use a dash sometimes instead of a dot. So it's a little confusing if you're from the States wondering what that is. But 7.1 is the magnitude, equivalent to 45 Hiroshima bombs or 0.0034 Krakatoa eruptions, or the equivalent compared to the largest earthquake on record in Chile magnitude 9.5, perhaps even greater, just a small fraction of that. So not the biggest earthquake compared to some of our historic averages, you could say, you know, some of these record events, but the biggest earthquake that we've had since December 8th of this year. Very, very large earthquake. No tsunami risk from this. I haven't like specifically checked, but I would be pretty blown away. We can type in NOAA tsunami and just sure to satisfy anyone that wants me to check. But there's not going to be any tsunami alert for this. Or there may have been an alert, but quickly they probably would have said, no, everything is fine. This looks like an old web page. These, here we go, U.S. Tsunami Warning Centers. Yeah, no tsunami warning, advisory, watch, or threat for the magnitude 7.1 earthquake at a depth of 385 meters in freedom units and located on the island of Borneo. But more could likely come. Just again, if we go back here, let's kind of do a quick summary of what I was saying earlier. Go back here. We see that this is a big earthquake. We see that we have this long drought period, and now we have this coronal hole about to go geoeffective. It's a large coronal hole that's on the solar equator, and it's wide, right? The last one we had was kind of snaking through the equator. It was a large hole, but narrow, meaning it doesn't really interact with us for a long time. This is there's probably like at least a dozen Earths across, if not more. So that means that we're going to be in that high-speed stream for a while, really embedded in it for probably at least like 3 days or so, maybe 4 or 5 days. The longer you're in that coronal hole high-speed stream, the more time it's able to build this resonance with the Earth and actually pull those earthquakes out. That's what it seems, to put it in really simple terms. So I would not be surprised if we have this be the first of kind of a sequence of earthquakes that occur. We can go to our global seismic data here, and we'll see what I'm talking about. If we look at 2020, well, they don't have 2025 up for some reason. The guy who runs this, I guess, needs to put the graphic for 2025. But there's other examples. Here's 2022. Here, see this seismic burst? We get this non-homogeneous distribution of earthquake activity across time. And this is a magnitude 7.6 there, Papua New Guinea, 7.7 Mexico, just about not even a week later. You see a whole bunch of high magnitude 6s and 7s clustered around that. Here's another example right there. This is 2021. This is more of a long distributed seismic burst, but here you see some very clear clustering. So that is here's a very clear example of a seismic burst, 2014. So that could be what's coming up. I would make, you know, we do forecasts here. I'm just more about forecasting than rather just giving you, hey guys, this is exactly what's going to happen. And then 2 weeks from now, I look like a fool. Okay. So in terms of the forecast, I would say that the chance of there being a more long-term, distributed across the globe, probably seismic burst for the next week or two, like that's how long it could last, is much higher than normal. Maybe that's like a 33% chance, like a 1/3 chance. It's really hard to say. I do think we have more high magnitude earthquake activity just in general coming up for the rest of February because of that coronal hole high-speed stream. Whether it turns into like a really significant seismic burst where we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 like big earthquakes, I think that's probably 20 to 30% chance. But some more high magnitude 6s, I think that's quite a bit higher, a majority chance. And in terms of this going right back down to where we were and it being super quiet, maybe that's like a 30% chance, 20, 30% chance. So those are the levels, okay? So again, it's not about just putting a single magnitude on a single date, at a single location. That is the holy grail. We hope to be able to do that. We have done it on the channel, specifically with the magnitude 8.8 megaquake 3 days before it occurred. We knocked it out of the park. I have that record on the channel for the video. We were talking also about a megaquake leading up to that for a couple months because we were in such a megaquake deficit. So, you know, if you're gonna nail a home run, you want to nail the big one, and we did, but it's very difficult. And in general, you're more likely to have success in terms of forecasting global earthquake rhythms, and then you do your best to find locations and more. So let's do that right now. Let's do it. If we have been seeing a lot of seismicity here, deep seismicity, and now a big 7.1 there, that kind of indicates that we're looking at the Australasian plate here. And there's kind of two scenarios for this. A, we have a bigger move for the Australasian plate coming up. Or B, I mean, there's also C, I'll get to that as well. Or B, this has been the move for the Australasian plate, and now because it is butted up against another plate, we're looking at an earthquake for one of the adjacent plates. C is all that could be wrong, and maybe we get a big earthquake, you know, in South America or something. It's all connected together at the end of the day. But I would probably put A as being the most likely, B being second most likely, and C being the last. Though if it's a real global seismic burst, you know, these high-speed stream, the solar wind impacts, the solar flares, all that stuff, the coronal mass ejection impacts are global in nature. So not really looking at it as isolated and specific to one location. Sometimes that's the case based off electric currents in the ionosphere and like the dawn and dusk side, and it gets very complicated. But keeping it simple, in general, these are global effects. So if we do get a seismic burst, it could be global in nature. It's more likely to be global in nature than not. But because we've been seeing so much deep activity, which often is a sign that we have shallow activity coming, because all that energy from deep down is loading faults closer to the surface. That's what you need to consider. That's a totally different geologic setting than the surface, but some of that energy does reach up, and all of it, except the energy that's radiated further down, if you take the plane directly above, all the 50% of the energy that's radiated up from those earthquakes is absorbed into the geology above. So fundamentally, that mineralogic change, let's say it is one of these mineralogic implosions, okay? All that energy does load everything up above it, and some of the energy will reach the shallow fault systems, and in general, that's going to put more stress on those faults and on the plates. So it's very likely we get a big earthquake somewhere in here. If we look specifically, I mean, maybe we're looking at Papua New Guinea because it's right in the middle of these two zones. So we've had a lot of release there. Again, the 7.1 is bigger in terms of seismic energy release total than all these combined, all the magnitude 6s I've shown here combined. So maybe we're looking at a big earthquake, Papua New Guinea. They get big earthquakes there. It's one of the most seismic activity places in the world. So if I had to write a list, I would put Papua New Guinea down as location number 1 to be looking at. I would then put Fiji, maybe actually Fiji's location number 1, Papua New Guinea's location number 2. Reason why Fiji, I would say actually is location number 1 is this right here. We had the magnitude 6.2 back on the 10th. We had the magnitude 6 on the 22nd. So less than 2 weeks apart, both of them being very, very deep, close together, and they're equivalent in magnitude approximately. So what that shows you is that this is part of some larger shift that's unfolding here. It's possible that it's just the two magnitude 6s, the 6 and the 6.2, and that's all she wrote. But when you start to get this sort of activity, and don't forget there's also been a 5.7 here just today at the same time as this 6, like I think within a minute of each other, right? It's all kind of a sign that this is maybe foreshock activity. And we've had magnitude 8+ deep earthquakes in Fiji before, also shallower ones, but this could be foreshock activity to something very, very big in Fiji. So actually I put that as location number 1 to watch. And then I would look at Papua New Guinea as location number 2. And for location number 3, I would say pretty broad, but just anywhere on the periphery of this. because this radiates energy out in all directions. And because it's deep, it's able to kind of send that energy further afield than perhaps like a shallow one. So even like anywhere in this zone here would maybe be location number 3. There's other factors as well, but I'll leave it there for, you know, perhaps location forecasting. Yeah, I mean, we go over the entire globe and talk about places that are overdue and eventually, you know, get a home run. But that's not the point. It's just to talk about the globe, every single location, every video, so I sound right and just cherry pick. I'm more interested personally in forecasting the global seismic rhythms that are occurring. And we use the space weather to do that, and we use the planetary resonances to do that. So we're currently in a G1 geomagnetic storm. We'll finish off by looking at our magnetic fluctuation right now on the ground. We have this map here. It's not too much, but it is more than normal. Get this loaded up, and then we'll do our question and answer for everybody. So here we are. So these are sort of magnetic fluctuations that are occurring right now on the planet. Actually, quite a bit more than I thought. I haven't looked at this yet today. So, you know, this is a 3-hour model here, just taking the data that we're getting and plotting the data on this map. We see our scale here, 0 nanotesla, 400 nanotesla. It can actually go off the scale because the 400 nanotesla swing isn't that much as it relates to a geomagnetic storm. So we see that we've been getting some good swings in the magnetic field just about 2 hours ago, an hour and a half ago. So yeah, I mean, things are really charged up right now. Before the live stream started, I was talking to our moderator who's here in the chat, Secret Owl. He didn't sleep that well last night. He's like, yeah, I had an out-of-body experience. You know, people have been having crazy dreams. Back home family situation, we have, you know, kind of an extended family member who's like losing their minds. So there's a lot of crazy stuff happening right now. So I would not be surprised if we continue to see more wild things happen into the rest of February and even going into March eclipse season. We have the total lunar eclipse on March 3rd, viewable from the west coast of the United States, all the Pacific. Hawaii will be smack dab in the center, and then even viewable the total lunar eclipse into China, Southeast Asia, Australia, I think New Zealand as well. Yeah, and of course, you know, we've talked about what's been happening societally. I'm not going to really talk about it in this video, but maybe like we're about to have a major conflict in the Middle East. There's crazy stuff happening with all the files being released. Like there's a lot of not like wacko things. So we're living in it. Best to keep cool, calm, collected. You know, make sure you're eating well, drinking good water, going for walks, breathing, like doing breath work, just focusing on breathing properly. All these things are very, very valuable. So with that, we will do a question and answer. And I want to check one last thing. I want to look at that plasma film at that launch. I think it's going to look really good on SUVI imagery. So if that is the case, we'll leave that up. Yeah, I think this is going to look ballin'. So, but we'll do our question and answer. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat. Just ask Stefan Burns. I'll take a few from the regular chat before I get to our super thanks, of which we already have some. So yeah, thank you all for being here. I hope you're all doing well. I appreciate your support and all the love and gratitude that you guys send. And happy to jump on a live stream when the things are happening. Again, first big earthquake, magnitude 7.1, Malaysia since December 8th. So about 2.5 months, you know, and I'm right on it. So that is my promise to you effectively when these things happen, is that I am right on it every single time. Even though I'm traveling right now, I got you guys, right? That's why I'm here. Hi, Stefan in Bratislava. We have earthquakes. Can you tell us why? Slovakia 4.6. Slovakia is a pretty active region seismically. Just in general, Central Europe actually gets more than you think. There are certain areas in Europe that get like little seismic swarms of magnitude 2s, 3s, 4s. Rarely you get a 5, and Slovakia has a lot of mountains. So That could be why. I know in Poland, for example, there's a location where they get regularly magnitude 4 earthquakes. And so in Bratislava specifically, I haven't been there. I don't, oh yeah, there's another nice thing that occurred right there too. For Bratislava, I don't know specifically. I haven't looked into that like super specific location for earthquakes, but Europe does get earthquakes. It's not like Europe gets no earthquakes. So I can't really tell you why, other than that is probably normal. Because yeah, Slovakia is one of those locations if you look at it just from a broader perspective. So thank you so much. The South Pacific anomaly, well, I'm not sure you're talking about. There's a South Atlantic anomaly. That's a magnetic field anomaly. It's probably what you're referencing. The South Atlantic anomaly, is it getting bigger? Well, in terms of yesterday, I can't tell you, but in terms of going from 2014, let's say, to today, yeah, it has gotten bigger. But in terms of, if you're asking about a South Pacific anomaly, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no South Pacific anomaly that I'm aware of for the magnetic field. Maybe you're discussing something else, but South Atlantic anomaly, yeah, it has been getting bigger over the recent decades. Yes, this is an area of Earth's magnetic field where the field strength is reducing as well. So it's not that it's getting bigger, it's just that it's reducing and reducing in overall Earth's magnetic field across like South America, South Atlantic, and then Western Africa. It's just spreading outwards as a result of that. I have not heard of Kangen water. Not sure what that is. Will I tell the mayor of a city to evacuate before an earthquake? I mean, there would have to be really, really clear activity that was like very troubling for me to put out a forecast for a very specific location in the immediate future. And that has happened before. Again, Kamchatka back in July was showing that sort of activity. Japan in November, December was showing that sort of activity. I was putting out those alerts. We had those earthquakes after those alerts. So, but in terms of reaching out to the mayor or something, that's probably not my job. You know, they're just gonna be like, here's another crackhead. So, but if there's enough of a community response, then maybe they would listen. But in general, you know, if you go online, type in earthquake prediction, there's a few examples, but in general, people say it's impossible. Yet, two of the biggest earthquakes in 2025, and actually more than that, but if we use just the ones that I mentioned, the 8.8 in Kamchatka, the 7.6 Japan, were accurately forecasted by me. Pretty spot on. We can go back to March and include the 7.7 Malaysia. Now, in terms of location, I didn't get that. The other two had location and time and rough magnitude approximations. But Malaysia was a global seismic burst. There was a magnitude 7.7, magnitude 7s and 6s, and we called that in terms of the time window globally. So, yeah, hopefully people in positions of power or whatever start to pay attention. But remember, the power is always with the people. The Bay Area has been quiet for 2 weeks now. Any sign of a rupture that can happen given the Saturn-Neptune convergence? Yeah, I mean, we had Loma Prieta in 1989, and that was with Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and we have Saturn-Neptune conjunct right now. Loma Prieta was the Bay Area, magnitude 6.9, and that was almost spot on with that. So there is an interesting resonance with the Bay Area and Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. It's kind of a n equals 1 as far as I know, but we have been seeing some odd activity in California earthquake-wise, and really more so in Northern California. So we did just have a magnitude 4.2 that struck the geysers, as well as a couple other higher magnitude earthquakes. The geysers is a geothermal field. It gets a lot of earthquakes quite often, but they're usually negative magnitudes or magnitude 0s or 1s or maximum 2. It's pretty rare to see a magnitude 4 from the geysers, though it's more rare to see a magnitude 4 elsewhere because the geysers are so active. But in general, if you're in the Bay Area, I would be ready. I would be ready. I would make sure you have your survival food and water on hand, hand crank radio, like be prepared. But in terms of, is it coming tomorrow. That's really hard to say. I do think the Bay Area is overdue. I have been calling, like forecasting, you could say. I have been forecasting a higher likelihood of a magnitude 5+ earthquake in the Bay Area for a couple months now. It has not happened yet, but we're still in my forecast window going up to February. And really, you could say up to eclipse season. We have the total lunar eclipse that will be viewable from California. That's on March 3rd. So that's kind of, I say at this moment in time, the forecast edge would be March 3rd, and then give probably a few days after that, because these things can kind of take a little time. And we're going to have a bunch of activity from that sunspot very likely in just 3 or 4 days, carrying us through that end of February, early March period, charging up the global electric circuit. So California, though, is very difficult to forecast earthquakes. It is a very odd system geologically there. It's not like others, which are more obvious. It's kind of stealthy, and it's really actually not that active compared to places like Mexico, you know, the Ring of Fire in Western Pacific, South America. California is, yeah, it gets earthquakes, but it's not a big earthquake player actually at a global scale. I mean, compared to Oklahoma it is, but Oklahoma is actually getting a lot of fracking-induced earthquakes now. So yeah, hope that helps. How is the hotspot Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific Plate possible? What are your thoughts beyond textbooks? So the Pacific Plate is quite large, but it's mostly oceanic crust. So it's actually not that thick. It's like, let's say 10 kilometers thick, 15 kilometers thick, something like that. Then you have the asthenosphere, and then, well, you have the mantle. So the Pacific Plate doesn't really influence a mantle plume rising up from the core mantle boundary and then through the mantle and more. The plate just is kind of like the final thing that gets in the way of that coming up, and that's why you have the Hawaiian volcanic island chain created by that hotspot. Keep in mind, plumes, based off of our best seismic imaging, it's not just like a single column like this. It's really like a dendritic tree. Okay, so it's a lot of channels and overlapping like kind of branches and more that spread out and weave to create this flow of convection and energy. And there's a lot of ideas as to how they're generated. Most of them are related to core mantle boundary dynamics. So you have the inner core, the outer core. It's where the outer core meets the mantle, and there can be interesting mineralogic things that occur there. And that's kind of the idea with generating mantle plumes, is that there's some sort of natural convection that occurs, possibly from the production of like light elements, you know, that want to rise up, like helium and others. I think there's something to that. There's also, if we're going beyond the textbooks, because that was your specific question, this is interesting. Consider an impact event. You have a large impactor coming in, like a big impact, okay? It's going to hit. Via the physics that we've modeled, it does seem that there is a pretty good spreading that occurs. So it will hit and then spread out and mix into the surface, but it still is going down. And let's say it's an iron meteorite. I mean, this thing is heavy, folks. Like the density of iron is high up there versus it's probably 2, 3, 4 times that of oceanic crust. I think the density of iron is like 7 or 8 grams per cubic centimeter. So basalt is about 3 to 3.3. So you're going to have that thing sink down, and now you're creating this downward convection. With time, I would not be surprised, and it's also, of course, putting a lot of heat in, right? A tremendous amount of heat just through the impact. Kinetic energy being converted to, all of a sudden, like latent heat energy. So boom, that's going to create this convection. I bet some of the hotspots on Earth and these mantle plumes were created from past impacts. And once that happened, and later on it's in its history, right? Because during the accretionary phase, you have a whole bunch of this. The whole Earth is churning. But later on, then you get that oddball out to hit, and then you have that whole sequence. If you have convection going, it may just start to maintain itself, especially given a geologic regime of plate tectonics where there is active convection occurring and the whole system still being energized by the sun and, you know, radioactive decay and more. So once it gets going, it may not necessarily stop quickly. This is all geologic time. So if we're going beyond the textbooks, I think that there's probably something to that, at least for some of the hotspot / mantle plumes for Earth. And a specific keyword that you could research and like type into Google, let's say, and research into would be drip tectonics, DRIP tectonics. They haven't connected that with impact events, you know, the official researchers, but effectively describing what that's about. So that would be a good place for you to start. It's very, very interesting. With that, we'll go into our super thanks questions and just welcoming some new members. Thank you, Chimp and Grow, for gifting 10 memberships. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Hannah, for your super thanks. Thank you so much. It's very appreciated. Much love. Indigo for being a member. Jack for being a member. Thank you all. And one of mine, a long-term supporter of the channel. Thank you for your membership of 13 months now. 13 is the number of lunar cycles in a year. That is very, very special. I just went to the stone circles last night. Let me actually show you this. This is pretty cool. I should have a video I can pull up pretty quickly. I went to one of the largest stone circles in Europe yesterday. And let's see if I can get this. Yeah, this is pretty wild. This is before the, well, I'll show you this one right here. I think this one will do it. There it is. You should be seeing that. And I just need to do this though. Yeah, so I was here last night, or yesterday rather, and we actually recorded a sound healing there. So the reason I mention this is that most of these circles had 13 stones. There was one with 15, with 12, one with 11, but most of them had 13. There were 9 of these stone circles. So a very powerful number, and we honestly should have a calendar that's based off of 13, not 12 months. So thank you for that. And this is kind of cool background. Let's keep it going. Okay, so Shale 44, Vatican tracked April plasma event apocalypse. Look into it. Okay. I see when it starts to get really specific, I grow more doubtful. But I'll look into it. I think we'll probably be fine. But we do have that sun grazing comet come in April 4th, and it could impact the sun, and that could trigger a significant coronal mass ejection. So, hey, who am I to say yes or no to anything? I will track everything very closely. That is my promise to you. Thank you, Wesley, for the super thanks. Question from Jen Wilmans. Someone mentioned Nibiru in the comments. Could you please give a scientific breakdown on Nibiru? Thank you. Well, there's a whole bunch of things in Nibiru. It goes back to basically, what is it? Not Mesopotamia, but God, I'm blanking right now. You know, some of the ancient cultures in Mesopotamia, effectively, which built the ziggurats and everything. This is going back to like 2500 BC, 3000 BC, around the time like some of the most ancient civilizations that we know of. They had this record of this celestial object known as Nibiru, and there's a lot of different ideas with that. They call it this red kind of object or planet, sun, star, and it could be a binary star. There's a lot of research and indications that the ancients talked about 2 suns. So maybe there's like a binary companion, ultra wide binary companion to the sun. That's very interesting. There's also this idea that there's this rogue planet that comes in every now and then, and that's Nibiru. So in terms of providing a scientific breakdown on it, now there's all this myth and lore like heaped up around it. So that's quite a big thing. And you have to kind of cut through that if you really want to get to the truth of it, because there's just a lot of nonsense now online, of course, as most people know. And Nibiru is one of those like crystallization points for all of that. But as a result of that, it effectively exposes you to a lot of different ideas. So it's a little bit of a wormhole for that reason. But scientifically, it was either a very important star that we've just misidentified, like mislabeled nowadays, or it was some sort of binary star companion for the sun that we've effectively lost track of, just like we lost track of heliocentrism until 1500, right? We thought everything orbited around the Earth. That's a pretty big, obvious thing, but for about 1,000 years, you know, we were clueless. Actually, more like, yeah, about 1,000 years. Or maybe it's some like Planet X type thing that comes in every now and then. They saw it come in and it's on this super long orbit, so it's super far out, it's super dim and dark, and it's moving so slow that we don't see it. These are all very possible scientifically. Because if you have an orbit that's 5,000 years and you're at the aphelion and it's moving super slow and its apparent magnitude is almost nothing, well, good luck finding that guy, right? So our telescopes only have certain limits to them. So then when it would swing in, it'd be close, it'd be bright, it'd be obvious, it'd be gravitational effects, maybe it's flinging comets in and things of this nature through the disturbance that's created. So the ancients aren't just to be taken, like they shouldn't be taken at face value, I'd say, but we should definitely pay attention to what they wrote down, especially when you're chiseling in stone. Like that's hard work. So they're in like building massive monuments to these things and the ziggurats and more. So there's something there. But to answer your question, more than that is like a massive video. And I'm not the ultimate expert on Nibiru, but there's something to it. There's a little kernel of truth that we're discovering with it, but there's a lot of, you know, kind of weirdo nonsense stuff wrapped around it, and that's fine. Artistic mysticism is the side where there are 0 sunspots, the side that faced 3i Atlas during its closest approach to the sun. I don't know. At that point, it'd be kind of difficult to track back. I mean, we'd have to do, if you want to do it, you could take your calendar, but there's always sunspots that are forming and moving away, you know, and collapsing and going away. So today's the 22nd of February. Just subtract 28 days, 28 days, 28 days, 28 days, and see what date you get. You could do that. But I wouldn't really put too much of a connection between the two for that. It's just more, as I see it, more just showing how we have this big disparity in the magnetic flux on the sun, which I find interesting. What are your thoughts on organized behavior and dusty plasma beyond standard instabilities? Non-biological life. Would love a video. Just finished Robert Temple's book. Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, well, we have an interview with Robert Temple on my channel. So it's Eileen McCusick and myself talking to Robert Temple. I think it's like a 2 or 3 hour long podcast. So you can go there. I have a podcast with Dana Kippel. We talk about this as well, though it kind of veers off into maybe the direction that you're thinking of more. We talk, you know, she really spent some time talking about like psychology and emotion and more. But dusty plasma, the big thing to keep in mind, this will be my answer for you. It's another one of these huge topics, is that you have plasma, which is already electromagnetic and very interesting. You have dust in there. This dust is typically has a charge, positive or negative, because it accumulates these charged ions. And if it's metallic dust, it can even have intrinsic magnetic properties to it as well, very conductive and things of this nature. It's the dust grains interacting with each other that makes complex dusty plasma so interesting. Also, the fact that they have often higher charge, because they can build up a lot of voltage. You know, a proton is just a proton in terms of its charge, but a dust grain can build up a charge going up to hundreds of volts, even a little bit more than that. It depends, but it can get really up there. It also is not as easily moved by the electromagnetic force because it does have mass to it, like significant mass to it. So you start to get these dynamics where it's interacting with the solar wind differently and things of this nature. So it just makes everything super, super complex, and it adds, it's almost like neurons in the brain talking to each other. Because if you have 1 million dust grains all in this cloud, and you have plasma all around as well, if you have 1 million dust grains in this cloud, think of that as like 1 million neurons in the brain, each one being electromagnetically connected to the others. You know, some connections will be more distant and weak, others will be more strong, but technically they are all connected together electromagnetically. And once you have that, you start to really increase the complexity of things. Now you have the basis of some sort of self-compute conscious system. That's what we're trying to do with computers. I mean, we have to some degree, but our brain is the best at it that we found in the universe thus far. Maybe dolphin brains are a bit better though. Have you ever seen a dolphin brain? They're insane, okay? It's like ours times 2. So, but complex dusty plasma, at the end of the day, it's less about the hardware, it's more like what's it made out of. You know, for computers, it's silicone and little transistor gates and stuff, okay? For our brains, it's neurons and how they're structured and more. With plasma, it's these grain particles. It's less about what it's made out of and more about the structure and the organization that's enabled by that. And as a result of there being a complexity in a structure, it's my belief that that is when then conscious can come in and effectively amplify. And it acts as a greater receiver for consciousness or a consciousness. So that would be my answer to you. Thank you for that. Super thanks. Kanya, you made a video on plasma like a snake on the sun. Yeah, the plasmoid organisms. Have you done much more research into that or deemed it just a random occurrence or more likely a random pattern of plasma movement? Perfect follow-up question. If there is consciousness with plasma, which is what the team that I'm on at this moment in time with my research, I mean, we have plasma in our body. There's plasma in our environment. The Earth has plasma. I've been seeing plasma with the geomagnetic storms recently up in northern Sweden. Like the way it moves is incredible. It's like very alive. And we look at this plasma film in there blasting off. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. I don't think that's just a one-off. Just sometimes we see like kind of a little bit of a glimpse into how it behaves a little differently. There's different scales to it as well, right? This entire sun here, our entire sun is conscious. Here we're seeing this plasma filament blast off, and that could be like a fractal level of consciousness perhaps to the sun. Now connecting to the interplanetary consciousness, because there's plasma all throughout our heliosphere due to the solar wind. So yeah, it's always on my mind. But in terms of those like weird plasmoids that we saw in the sun, they're happening all the time. We just need the high powered equipment to see them. So if we were to look at the sun all the time with those sort of optics, we would just get dozens, hundreds, thousands of videos of those weird plasma movements occurring. Yeah. So thank you so much for the super thanks. Butter Toast, off topic, but a great Stargazer comment that'll be coming next month. We'll be releasing content about it. I already have. There is one video on my channel, and thanks for that because I will actually segue into showing you the new clips channel. So if we go to YouTube right here and we type in Stefan, well, actually, this is going to be the easiest way to do it. If you're on my channel, okay, I don't think you're hearing that, but just to be sure, if you're on my channel, you can go to the links here and scroll down and you will see now my clips channel. And I'm going to create a playlist with my clips specifically. I don't have much there. I see some people have already found it. But if we go to videos, you'll see that I have one video right there. I filmed this just recently, posted this, still need to update the title, thumbnail, whatever. But that is there, and we're going to start posting clips from the live streams to this channel. So there's already a couple of clips I have in my mind from this question and answer that will get up here. So if you want to follow the clips channel, this is something I would definitely recommend because some of you are asking for shorter videos. Well, here is your chance to get that. And as it relates to your question, this is my latest update on Comet C2026A1 maps. It's getting brighter and faster than expected. So it looks like, as of right now, it looks like it's going to be a really bright comet coming in March and April. So thank you for your super thanks. Okay. Do you think the sun could enter into a grand solar minimum? It is certainly possible. We could definitely do that now with our next solar cycle. The question is just going to be, will it happen? I'm pulling up the solar cycle progression right now so you can see what I'm talking about. There are some ways to forecast this, like based off some pretty complex physics, but in general, we're just going to have to wait and see. Because here we have our solar cycles going back to like 1820 or so, okay? We haven't had a grand solar minimum during this entire time frame. If I add just a little bit more here, this is our Dalton minimum. We did not have a grand solar minimum here, but we see that clearly there was lower sunspot activity for 2 entire cycles. We did recently just have solar cycle 24 here. You notice a little reduction in activity there at the kind of around the 1900s, you know, the about 25 years on both sides basically. So that's a Gleisberg cycle. Every 84 years or so, about every 85 to 100 years, we get this reduction in solar activity. And then of course the peak of that would be, you know, about 40 to 50 years after that low, we get kind of a high. So you see here, late 50s, this solar cycle, very, very strong. We see here, early 1800s, very, very strong. Solar cycle 3, very, very strong. So you see kind of this rhythmic modulation there. But a grand solar minimum just is like a complete plummet on the sunspot count such that it goes to 0. 0 sunspots. And not just maybe for 1 solar cycle, but it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 solar cycles. And often what we see with the historic record going way back, like thousands of years, is that we get this clustering of grand solar minimums. So that is a whole different thing to forecast. And I think at that point you need to bring in the astrophysical environment, because I think we're talking about astrophysical influences, perhaps from like interstellar Birkeland currents and energy flow through those influencing our sun to perhaps alter that solar dynamo. It's a big open question, but are we going to go there for our next one? Maybe. Every single solar cycle is an open question as to whether we're going to enter into a grand solar minimum. There's been this Russian scientist, Zarkova, who's been calling for it for like, I don't know, 15, 20 years now. And she actually thinks we're in it right now. And, you know, just like, well, you know, we're not in grand solar minimum right now. Doesn't matter, you know, she just got so invested in this idea that she wasn't able to admit that she was wrong. Doesn't mean she's not smart or whatever. I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of great things. I don't know her. I'm not trying to speak poorly, but we're clearly not in a grand solar minimum. So you have to go by what the data and observations are telling you. If our sunspot count plummets and stays low, and basically we don't come out of solar minimum, and it's 2035, 2036, and it's like, hey, where are the sunspots? We're in a grand solar minimum. We're going to have a solar minimum soon. You know, sunspots will go down to 0 with solar minimum. But grand solar minimum, it's going to be when we'll know when we're in the ascending phase of the next solar cycle and we still are at 0, then we'll know. And we'll really know we're at the maximum phase of solar cycle 26 when that would be expected, mid-2030s, and we're still at 0. But I don't think it's a high likelihood. I put it at probably 10%. Not even that, probably like 5% chance, if that. But who knows, right? It's a total open question. And from Gizem, hello Stefan, about the Saturn-Neptune cycles. In the past, you saw major structural and ideological shifts. Where do you think the main pressure point can emerge in this cycle? I think it already has emerged. I think we're seeing an increase in war, specifically now with some of this Iran conflict, but Ukraine is also getting really wild. Those two are resonant with that, Russia and Iran, with that cycle. And the big thing is the release of these files. And there's also this perhaps a disclosure aspect, you know, in terms of aliens or whatever. So those I think are the main pressure points. And I would not be surprised if a financial one gets added into that. But we'll have to wait and see. But we're really in the thick of it right now. So the things that are happening right now that are really capturing the public's attention, namely the e-files, right? That's a big one. Because that's a global thing. And it's changing everyone's perception about how they live their life, right? Like, why go to work every day and pay all these taxes when there's people that are just doing this awful stuff? So I don't want to get into this video, but yeah, that's the main pressure points. Earth Conscious Soul, thank you for your dedication to keeping us informed when you're traveling. You are quite welcome. Thank you so much for the super thanks. Artistic Mysticism, is the no sunspot side the one that phase 3 at Atlas? I answered your question. Thank you for your super thanks. What do you think will happen during the perihelion of C2026A1 maps? I recommend you go to my clips channel and watch that recent video. I will link that in the video description, by the way, so you can, after the live stream's over, so you can go there that way as well. I don't think it's impossible that it impacts the sun. I think we're going to get a big show, though. Whether it's a really bright comet or whether it impacts, I think we're due to something bigger rather than smaller because, well, we can use the planetary resonances as a guide. Back in 1965 with IKEA Secchi comet, that was right when we had the Pluto-Uranus conjunction. And we have Pluto and Uranus in a trine right now. And Neptune was in a sextile to Pluto and Uranus. So we have very similar planetary configurations geometrically now as we did in 1965 when we had that other Kreutz sun grazer. That was one of the great comets of the 20th century. So I'm erring more on the side of it being a great comet than it just being a fizzle out. It's the furthest out detected, it's big, it has all the necessary ingredients to be a big one, and then you look at the planetary alignments and they're giving you a thumbs up. Well, we'll find out, but that's my thought process. Am I ready for the great solar flash? We'll see if we ever get one. I don't think there's anything you do to be ready for that other than just being a good human being in your daily life. Because if you think that being a bad person and then somehow you'll be fine when something happens like that, if you believe in all that stuff, you just live a good life, be a good person, and then you're always ready at any moment for the end. That's my thought process. Am I familiar with Sadhguru? Yeah, Sadhguru is awesome. I think he's really great. Gives really good advice in general. I like what he's doing with his Save the Soil movement. So yeah, I'm quite familiar with him and listen to some of his lectures every now and then. Thank you for your super thanks, guys. What is your ideal of the Bay Area? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I just don't know what you mean by that. But thank you for the super thanks. Thank you, Diana, to you as well. And Beauty's Poet, would you explain what we were watching, the SUVI, and how this imaging has changed over the past 20 plus years? It's quite beautiful. Thank you, Stefan, for all you do. Wish you well. Okay, well, I can do that. Let's go to my X account. And I replied to someone recently about this. So, oh, look, I'm live. Actually, you guys can't see my my screen. Yeah, I'll turn it on in a second. Just want to get the right one up. Because someone had this whole thing here. Here it is. Okay. So, and I don't know this person, and you know, this is not really commentary on them, but more on what they wrote. We've all seen this flaming fireball depiction of the sun that NASA has been showing us since we were kids, but have you ever actually looked at the sun with a camera? It looks a lot different than what you were told. Let's turn that off. You know, this is looking at sunspots on the sun. You have a certain filter for that. And then later on, you know, basically saying, this is what the sun looks like, this is fake. Okay, well, here's my reply. Some of you may have already read this. Different filters are needed to image different surface layers of the sun. Of course, you have different layers. You have the corona, you have like the photosphere, the chromosphere, you have deeper layers than that as well. And another very important fact to know is that the CGI imagery of the sun collected by NASA is done from space because we're looking at the sun in extreme ultraviolet and X-ray wavelengths. Those get absorbed into the ionosphere of the Earth. So you simply can't get those observations from the surface because, well, it's getting absorbed at the ionosphere, 1,000 kilometers up, 200 kilometers up. So we didn't have any of those sort of observations of the sun until we went to space. And I think Skylab was the first space mission in 1973 that started giving us these EUV imagery, images of the sun. And since then, we launched Solar Dynamics Observatory. And the thing that to be mindful of is that we do, you know, we collect the raw data and then we apply different color filters to it in order to better pull out different features and more. And there's different wavelengths of light that we look at to look at different layers, but in general, it's not fake. There is image modification that's done in order, again, to highlight features better so we can see it, because what we're concerned about is actually being able to see the darn thing. But there's, as far as I know, there's no fake CGI being done. And there's, thousands of astronomers around the world who are pointing their telescopes at the sun, and they can look at it in a variety of ways and match up certain features with what we see, like sunspots and more. But in order to get those fake looking images, you need to be in space. Simple as that. You have to be beyond the reach of Earth's atmosphere. So hope that answers your question. And one from Kunohi, or maybe it's Kunobi, is on the topic of ancient celestial observations, is it possible that still bodies of water in dark bottom ponds were used? Water and floating iron were used for due north compasses. Could be other elements were used. I don't know. I mean, that sounds like kind of interesting, an interesting idea in terms of getting a really still pond as like a mirror. That would make it easier than having to go like this all the time. I don't know. There probably wouldn't be any record or trace of that in the archaeological record, though. That's the thing. So it's a great idea. You should maybe try that out, test it. But as far as I know, we're not going to have any record of that. You could also probably do that rather than with like a whole pond, but just with like a small bowl. Maybe that works. I don't know. It's interesting. Definitely worth doing some testing on that. That's very clever. Thank you for the super thanks. Stephen Gould, thank you for the super thanks. That is very appreciated. Yeah, I have some amazing aurora pictures on my Instagram, also on my X account, so you can follow me there. It's linked in the video description if you want to see some aurora photos I've taken recently. I've gone through 3 hybrid vehicles in the past 4 years. Electrical inverter issues. Would you avoid EVs and hybrids in case they are affected more nowadays? Yeah, I mean, I would avoid them. Well, I mean, I like certain aspects and ideas about them, but in general, it's a lot of EMFs. They have a lot of components that can break down that aren't as easily replaced or fixed nowadays. The battery life degrades faster than they say. I wouldn't get an EV until they have like more reliable solid state battery technology, personally. And I don't have a car right now at all. But I just drove one for a rental and it was pretty cool. It worked out nice. But they have all these steer assist features now, which like are actually dangerous. It's trying to I'm trying to do a left turn. It's trying to like jerking me back into my lane. I'm like, what is this nonsense? How do people put up with this? So I'm not into all that. As it relates to your car issues, I don't know. We've been in solar maximum. It's not going to help. It's not going to help your car. It's only going to hurt your car. But the significance level is what we don't know. How significant of an effect that is, I don't know. Off topic, but Santa Claus is a psyop. Can you help spread the word? Slay Santa, imagine an honest world is my site. Well, thank you for the super thanks, and anyone that wants to look into that can do that. Thank you, Alex, for the super thanks member for 8 months. That's awesome. And Melrose, grateful for your knowledge and wisdom surrounding all in good energy and peace. That is an excellent message. We will come back to that as our take home. But before that, Jim Silver, does Earth's crust pressurize due to piezoelectric influences from solar energy impacts downloading through to the crust? Yes, that is an effect. Again, the question is, how significant of an effect is that? It's not going to be, well, I don't know how significant it is. I think it is significant. We do see sometimes earthquakes happen literally the moment we get a very strong solar flare impact to the ionosphere. So there's something to it. But it's not driving every single earthquake. It's just another component of a larger system. But yeah, you have the reverse piezoelectric effect, effectively, where an electrical charge passing through a mineral structure, crystal structure, will generate stress and mechanical strain, deformation. Whereas the piezoelectric effect is you put strain on a crystal structure and generate an electric charge as a result. So you're thinking of the reverse piezoelectric effect. But yeah, I think that's at play. I do think it is significant and relevant, but it's not for every single earthquake. But more than mainstream geologists would say, because they don't believe in this stuff, basically. Some do, the pioneers do. Those really looking into things, and they have a mind for not just rocks, but also physics and chemistry and this, and they're all over the place. They're more of a Renaissance man, you could say, or multidisciplinary in their research and their understandings are more on board with some of these concepts, because you have to look at the whole to understand the pieces at the end of the day. So one of the biggest crimes that's been committed with science has been, it's been too focused and narrow, and siloed, and now no one knows anything basically. So yeah, thank you, Melrose, for the super thanks. Surrounding all of you who are watching in good energy and in peace. I welcome you. I hope that continues for all of you. I hope you're all feeling well. It's crazy energies right now, so just make sure you get some rest as best you can. Make sure you treat your body well. Get some movement in every day, even if it's just a walk. It's a great opportunity to do some deep breaths. You know, don't be hard on yourself right now. Now's not the time for that. And cultivate fun. Do things that are fun and exciting. I think that, you know, cultivate that spirit within you that just gets excited and joyful to live and to wake up the next day. That's what it's all about right now. In general, that's what it's all about. So that is my take-home message for you. One final thing to note, an announcement, is that we have a sale right now ongoing at earthevolution.com/store. This is the February sale of Be the Light. So on that topic, Be the Light, for 7% off. We don't have discounts all that often on the store because honestly, everything here is already pretty fairly priced. I'm not here to, you know, gyp you of money, but every now and then we like to hold promotions, especially during times like this, at the Saturn-Neptune Great Conjunction. And we have tons of herb coffee in stock. I know you guys love this. Well, we have it in stock, so don't hesitate to pick up some herb coffee. You won't be disappointed. 50% single origin, shade grown, organic, Peruvian coffee beans. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's super, super tasty. Medium roast, as well as roasted organic chicory root, roasted organic dandelion root, and organic lion's mane mushroom. That combination synergistically is so good for stimulating neurogenesis and improving neuroplasticity and getting you focused and in the flow and creative. And it's just a fantastic drink to have in the morning. It's really good for your gut, much better than just normal coffee, unless you're getting really good coffee. Like I drink a lot of really good coffee. One of the small pleasures in life. So if you are having, like, it's not going to affect your gut like maybe normal coffee does, which can kind of be stressful. This is actually gut promoted because of those roots in there. And in general, it's just super tasty. It's super, super good. It's half the caffeine. You're not going to get blitzed out. This is available on the website, wildfreeorganic.com/store. You get 10% off right now using the code BeTheLight. And everything else is in stock. So I recommend you look through our products and pick some things up if you feel a resonance there. Just want to let you know that we do have this sale ongoing till the end of February. So this is also one for sure to pick up, considering the Saturn-Neptune Great Conjunction. These energies are active for some time, so you're not late. This is our spirituality tea blend, purple lotus flower, chamomile, passion flower, and mugwort in a synergistic blend. Helps you to rest, relax at a minimum, and at a most, it potentiates dreams, makes them more vivid, lucid, precognition, even astral experiences are possible, out of body, and more, depending on your sensitivity and that. But it's not like crazy, you know, this is all normal stuff. It's not like psychedelic, but it's just, it helps just to get the system kind of primed up. So really good stuff, and at the very minimum, it just helps you sleep. So I recommend maybe you pick up some of this as well if you haven't already. If you haven't tried it, I definitely recommend it. It's one of the highest quality tea blends that you can buy anywhere, bar none. I stand by that 100%. We source the best ingredients, we make and mix these ourselves, package them ourselves, ship it out from the United States, available to everyone in the US. So with that, thank you all so much, everyone, for watching. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, wishing each and every single one of you well. I'll keep you up to date on what is happening with the Earth energetically. We've had this magnitude 7.1 earthquake strike Malaysia, and that is quite large. No follow-up aftershocks to that yet. That could change. That could be a foreshock to something bigger. I think we're probably at the beginning of a seismic burst. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date. Smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. And I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks so much and have a great day.